Thanks for coming out tonight. We're really privileged to have one of the world's top music producers here, the one and only Trevor Horn. Big round for Trevor, please. As you've been walking in, we've been playing some of Trevor's tunes. There's been a lot of them. Trevor's here to deliver a masterclass on producing vocals, which I'm sure you'll all agree is going to be really, really important. It's one of the most important things when producing hit records, and so going to be really valuable for all you guys studying music production and, you know, recording vocals is such a massive part of trying to make a hit record, essentially. So to give you a bit of background, Trevor formed the Buggles in the 70s, and in 1979 had a #1 hit with Video Kill the Radio Star, which Ski has just got his album signed there. This is the record. And then went on to produce some of the most recognisable anthems that define the 80s. So we're talking about things like ABC's Lexicon of Love, which is actually one of my favourite albums of all time. Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes. 3 #1s with Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Relax, 2 Tribes and The Power of Love. And the list goes on and on and on. I haven't got time to go through the list, but just give a couple of examples of some of the hits. So yeah, really privileged to have such an amazing producer with us tonight. And Trevor is also touring, playing live, and I know you've been touring with your band, the Trevor Horn Band, so hopefully you'll be able to see Trevor play live at some point next year. And also, just recently, one other thing I should mention is which I think would be very interesting after today's masterclass, is there's just published a book called Adventures in Modern Recordings, from ABC to ZTT. So this is Trevor's story, and it's told through 23 of his most important songs. Anyway, one more round of applause and I'll hand over.
Since I've been in the record production business, I started in about 1975, the one thing that really hasn't changed that much is recording vocals. I mean, everything else has changed beyond all recognition, really. I guess what you can do after you've recorded vocals has changed, but it's still the same old thing. It's still you stick a mic in front of a singer and record him singing. But obviously there's a lot more to it than that. And I thought, for the purposes of tonight, imagine you have a singer coming to your studio to record a song. It could be somebody famous or somebody new. But let's presume, for the sake of this talk, that you haven't worked with this artist before. Singing in front of people, particularly strange people, crew, you know, people around you, is always a funny experience, you know. Even if you're quite a famous singer, you know, you're going to be, you know, the first time when you sing in front of new people, there's always a sort of little bit of a tense moment, because, you know, if you're a really big star, they're going to see you through a microscope in the recording studio, because that's the way they see you. That's the way they hear you. You may be lucky. Your singer may be confident, looking forward to singing this particular song, and know it perfectly. But that really doesn't happen very often, I'm afraid. Funny enough, it did just happen to me with Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop sang on a track that I made, and he was absolutely pro, and he really knew it, and he ran the session. He told me very early on, Trevor, I don't know if you mind, I'm going to run my own session. I'm going to sing this song 4 times. I'm going to sing it once softly, once hard, third time really hard, and then I'm going to talk it. Okay, great. But that happens very rarely. Over the years, I've recorded lots and lots and lots of different singers. It doesn't matter whether they're famous or not. And this is kind of generally where I start. Preparation. Some of this is really bog simple, but the first thing you need before your vocal session is an absolutely perfect lyric sheet with all the lyrics, including repeat choruses, written out in the correct order. I've got a couple of pictures. There's not going to be many pictures in this lecture because it's too time-consuming. There is a microphone and a lyric sheet. Do you see the problem is with that? That's a good lyric sheet. It's written out properly. I think it's for like a Rolling Stone. But it's way too small. If Bob Dylan was coming in to sing that, he wouldn't be able to read that at all. So do we have a bigger one? That's bigger. That's a sort of good size. But if you've got blind old aging rock stars, you need something like this, right? That's generally the way we do it. So it's nice and big and they can see every word. It's very important having all of the right lyrics on there, because if you put a wrong lyric on there, your singer will sing it. I can't get any satisfaction. You know what I mean? If you put any there, he'll sing it, right? That's the first thing you need. I think it's also very important. Since this is educational, I'll try and keep it as entertaining as possible. But it's good to write down every chorus, the way it comes. Don't go chorus, repeat, or like 2 verses and go back to chorus. It won't work. Everything the way it comes. And if there's like an 8-bar bit in the middle, put 8 bars, 8 bars rest, just so the singer knows what he's got to sing. A reference version of the song with guide vocal singing correct tune to hand, so you can play it immediately. If you're doing like a Diane Warren song for a film or something like that, you have the demo right there, so that when your singer starts, you can, if there's any doubt about any part of the tune, I put here a copy of the sheet music of the song with the tune written out. Is also really useful. I did a whole load of re-records for a film years ago called Mona Lisa's Smile, and they were all songs from 1949, and I was doing them with people like Kelly Rowlands, who had never sung old-fashioned songs before. So I had to be the tune Nazi, I had to keep saying, no, love, the tune isn't quite what you sang there. It's this. Sometimes that's not available. So I've always found it's a really good thing to learn the song yourself. I used to be a singer, and I still sing a bit, and I've got quite an unthreatening voice. So, it's not like I'm going to sing and I'm going to be like loads better than who I'm recording. Because believe me, if I am, I shouldn't be recording them. But it's really handy to actually know the tune, because you've got to keep the vocalist on the tune. Stick to the tune. Don't forget, it's a record. It's not a live performance. I always check the headphones before the singer comes in and listen to the mix that he's going to hear. Is it good to sing over? Will he know where to come in? And in a way, that's really important. There should be some sort of clear signal where the vocal starts, or it should be, you could put a count on the tape, just a number of bars and count the guy in. But sometimes, if you're not careful, you can have a problem. I'll give you a little example. I did a record with Rod Stewart back in 1991 called Downtown Train.
Another yellow wing.
Okay. Now you see, it sounds pretty straightforward, that intro, but actually if you come to sing it, you find that it's actually 5 bars before the vocal comes in. I'll count it for you. Just play it again. 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4.
Outside another.
When I first tried to get Rod to sing that, he was furious. The fuck are you doing? 5-bar intro? I'm an R&B singer. I've never had a 5 fucking bar intro in my life. So I actually had to go out and count him in. The whole point was that the 5th bar was just there to give a pause before it started. So you need a clear signal. If the intro is atonal, meaning if it's just drums and there's no hint of what the actual key is or anything, it's always a good idea to put something on there to give the singer the pitch. To give you an example of how badly that can go wrong, I don't know if you remember the first time that we ever got Neil Poir in Eurovision, right? And one of the reasons we got it is because the intro only had one tiny instrument on it and some sort of drums, and the poor girl that was singing it came in totally the wrong key. And it sort of made the first 16 bars a cringe fest. And we got Neil Poir. So it's always a good idea, if there's no harmony there, put something there. I've got a particular thing about count-ins, If you're like, for instance, I don't know if you remember when Paul McCartney sang Hey Jude on the roof of Buckingham Palace. He screwed up the entry, right? He came in the wrong place. He was meant to mime, and because he came in the wrong place, meaning he was totally out of time with his pre-recorded vocal, they had to fudge it, and he had to actually play it. The problem was that what he had to count him in was, now that is useless, right? Because who knows, you might have missed the first one, you might have been dreaming, and you suddenly hear, it was actually beat 2 was the first one you heard. I have a thing, if somebody's singing something live on TV, I always put a voice count on it for them. A voice count, you will always come in the right place, because even if you miss the start, at least you can hear 3, 4, and you know where you are. If there's a key change, a reference note can be good as well. Just to get sort of technical for a second or two, because I'm not really very technical. You need a pretty big amplifier for your headphones. The biggest one you can lay your hands on. Because, when you're monitoring, doing a vocal, you're dealing with transients. Those are the things that sort of jump out and use a lot of headroom up, because everything isn't all pre-compressed. You're recording something new. I once made the mistake of recording Rod. It was the first time he ever sang into a computer. I made the mistake of just using a Mackie mixer. I thought the headphone amp on it would be enough. Boy, was I wrong. I mean, by the time we got to the end of the session, not only was Rod in his underpants and covered in sweat, because he always does that anyway, but the headphones sounded like, the guitar on Satisfaction. They were so distorted. I went out the next day and bought a 400-watt amp, chord amp. That made all the difference. So you need a really powerful amplifier. Now, you should have consulted with your singer before the session to make sure you were in the right key. Even with this consultation, the key may still be wrong. Make sure you have transposition software. I mean, let's face it, you can get away these days with transposing a backing track up a tone or down a tone, and you should be all right. Anything after a tone, it all gets crap. The right key is where your singer's voice is displayed at its best. This can be a tricky area because sometimes singers give you the wrong key. I've written here, if in doubt, check your singer's previous recordings. Years ago, I think it was 1988, I did a commercial for the only commercial I've ever done in my whole career. I played on a few, but I never actually did any. But this one, it was for Jazz Perfume. I was only doing it because I lost the Frankie Goes to Hollywood court case. They had offered me a lot of money, so I put my scruples to one side and did it. But I had a very easy run of it because it was a guy called Jean Good or somebody who was directing the commercial. And he, when I said, okay, I'll do it, they said, phone this number. And I phoned the guy and he said, I want to, producers, it's Jazz Perfume. Producers make jazz now. I want you to do a version of C'est si bon. C'est si bon. Ba-da-ba-da-da-da-ba. He said, that will be the commercial. And do whatever you want with it. So I had this idea. I thought, well, we'll do it old-fashioned and then modern. And then back to old-fashioned again, and then modern. And what we'll do is we'll have the singer singing it an octave down, c'est si bon, a normal key. And then when we go modern, we'll jump up an octave and she can sing it an octave up. And it was Jill Jones who was going to sing it. I told Jill Jones down the phone, she was in America, I told her what we were doing. So could she find the key? So she called me back and said A flat. So she was on a plane on a Sunday night coming from Los Angeles. And I had the studio booked on Sunday to do the backing track and on Monday to do a 15-piece horn section. Actually, it wasn't 15, it was 20. It was a really big horn section. When we went in on the Sunday afternoon to record it, I had Tessa Niles doing the guide vocal. When she started to try and sing the song in A flat, she couldn't sing it. And she said to me, man, I mean, is this just a mini fucking mouse or something? Because when she goes up the octave, this is so high. I can't sing it. So we went and we managed, it was a Sunday afternoon, we managed to get a copy of her album. And we listened to it. And so it was so obviously the wrong key. There's no way on her album she was anywhere near the notes that she would need to sing. So we figured anyway that the best key for her was E flat, which is a fourth away, obviously. And it meant that if I was wrong, we would have to re-record a 20-piece horn section and the whole bit. And I couldn't get her on the phone because she was already at the airport, already on the plane. So I had to decide. And so I said, God, do it. We're going to do it in E flat. And so we recorded it in E flat. We went in on the Monday. We put the horn section on it. It sounded great. And she arrived at 4:00 in the afternoon. She came running in. And I was like, great to see you, Jill. And she said, oh my God, I've made a terrible mistake. I can't apologize to you enough. She said, I got the key wrong. I said, don't worry, love, we figured it. And she burst into tears because she's been so paranoid. But let me tell you, it can be, it's a very important thing, getting the key right. Stool and a glass of water, is always a good thing. Water is very important. Battery-operated keyboard for note reference. Great for when you're doing harmonies and there's those in-between notes that you have to keep reminding yourself of. Do not have an array of mics. This is one of my pet hates. Anytime any engineer tries to do this with I've worked with Tim, my engineer, for years, and we never do this, but don't do that because it distracts the singer, and then they're singing, and what are you doing? Listening to their performance or listening to the mic? They're all pretty much the same anyway. I mean, these are all actually really good ones. If your singer has a big dynamic range, you might put one mic in the air. I've only ever done it twice. But I thought I might play you one of the tracks that I've done it on. Terry Reid was called Leather Lungs because he had such an incredible dynamic range. And when I first tried to record him, I did get a bit of a surprise. You can hear, but this is the record I made with him, and you can see the difference in the texture of his voice.
Stirring in the air, how well I remember all of them anthems we did share on the 5th of July.
This is all on the close-up mic. Now the overhead. The sound of his voice when he went to that other note was deafening by comparison to when he was singing the verse. But he's the only guy I've ever really had to do that with. From a point of view of mics and mic pre's, there's so many available these days. I mean, I would just say always use the best mic you can lay your hands on. And generally the best mics are the old valve ones because they put a lot of top end on somebody's voice. I mean, the new 87s are really good too. But you can't go wrong with an old valve mic. But I mean, you still get a great vocal on a 57 if you have to. It's all depending on your singer and the song, really. I tend to use a Sony G800 or a Telefunken 251 and a thing called an Avalon, which you might have heard of. I've used it for years. It's a kind of combination mic pre-compressor, but it's in like 2 U's. To me, it's always sounded at least as good as anything else. Some people get very, they get very fetishistic about their vocal chain. If you work with people like Celine Dion, I mean, what they have on their monitors is like beggars belief. So that's preparation. Now actually recording your singer. We all sort of do it the same way these days. We do multiple takes and we compile a lead vocal. Didn't used to be able to do this when I started out because you were working on 8-track or 16-track and the vocal was generally one of the last things you did. So you might have 1 or 2 tracks for it, and so you'd have to keep punching in, like doing it a line at a time and punching in. That was a total pain in the ass. It really was, because if you messed up on the punching in, you take away a bit of a good line, and sometimes you could gradually destroy something good. It worked because, don't forget, back in those days you couldn't do much with the vocal after you had it anyway. Some people, the sort of multiple take and comping it doesn't work very well. I did a few tracks with Cher back in I can't remember when it was, in the 90s, I think, and she'd do 5 takes of a song to be identical. You could, so you can put them all in, and it sounded like she was tracking herself. I said to her, you always do it the same. She said, look, I used to do a TV show, and I used to have to learn 4 songs a week. So once I learn the song, it's there, and I just do it exactly the same every time. But other people, it's sort of, you know, they'll throw in a few licks. They'll do something that you might want to put in there. Anyway, my maxim is always record everything. Some singers, when they get there, they like to chat. Some singers just want to get on with it. It's always a good thing if you can let your singer, the person who's come to sing your song, know in some kind of subtle way that you like his or her voice, even if you don't. I learned that because I was in a group called the Buggles and my partner was Jeff Downs. And I always knew that he thought I was a crap singer, right? I am, but I don't need to be reminded. One time I was looking in the mirror just before a TV show and I was being funny and I said, "Oh God, why didn't God give me longer legs?" And Jeff said, "Well, at least he gave you a great voice." Ooh, and people make jokes like that, you know, right? And I made a vow that when I started producing people, I would never do that to them. When I was doing the vocals on the Buggles album, there was always a little bit like, you know, oh God, it's the vocals. So they'd put me in a booth or something, do some crazy shit with me, and I'd be singing lines over and over and over again till the lyric meant nothing to me, you know? So I also vowed not to do that again. It's a good maxim to try not to work with singers whose voices you don't like. It's just a good idea, if you can avoid it. Sometimes you can't, right? Because you get things foisted on you. You start making a record for a movie, the singer changes suddenly. It isn't the person you thought it was going to be, it's somebody else. Now, there was a program. It was a spoof program that one of my friends showed me, and it was called Virtual Studio Visitor. You know, it meant that, you know, when you got your lead vocal, you could affect it by having a virtual visitor, like your singer's ex-wife, you know, your singer's mistress. Would he have sung better? Your singer's bank manager. Who knows? In my experience, male singers do sing better if there are women around. And not as well if there are men there. I said to Seal very early on when we started working together, I said, I don't mind how many girlfriends you have coming to the studio, but I don't want any of your bodies in the studio. And Seal used to say, "No, mates, only birds." And but it did sort of work, because the problem with mates is that they can say things sometimes that can really disrupt the session, and sometimes it's just not what you want there, you know. I remember being on a session with a famous guy, famous singer whose name shall be I'm not going to name him. And he only had to sing about a minute for a track in a movie. And he came in with his father-in-law. And his father-in-law sat next to me. And when the artist had sung the song for the first time, the father-in-law said, "Oh, I see how this works. It's like a photograph. You touch him up afterwards. That's why he sounds so good." That's why the artist is there. And I said, "Well, it's the first time he's sung it, mate. You know what I mean? Voice is like a musical instrument. First time you sing it, it'll get a lot better than this before I have to start tarting it up." But you don't want people talking about that stuff in a session, you know? You are the audience, so you must respond in some way to every take that your singer does. And you should always try and respond positively. A couple of times when I've been on other people's sessions, that's what's driven me nuts, is seeing the singer sing a take, and then everybody in the control room just yaks. No one goes, "That was great," or no one applauds. And sometimes in those sessions before I've left, I've like applauded or done something, because it drives me crazy to see somebody singing and not getting any input. Your engineer should learn where your singer is singing loud and adjust the input accordingly, rather than setting an overall low level. This is an interesting one, because in analog days, you couldn't lift a voice up 15 dBs like you can now. You could, but man, it would sound like the singer was singing in a hurricane. There was so much noise. So you had to always follow the singer. I mean, the tape was a bit more forgiving than digital is now. And so if you overloaded it, it wasn't too bad. But you did have to, tweak the mic pre all the time and follow. Good engineers sort of mark it up, and they'll know when he's going to do something. I mean, you see, these days it's too easy. I get vocals sometimes other people have recorded, and they're these like tiny little worms. And I'm superstitious. I think all the gear works better when you drive it harder. The mic pre, even the digital. I think it's better. I think if it's too quiet and you amp it up, it's not quite the same. Talkback should be on all the time to keep good communication. There's nothing worse than people talking and you can't hear what they're saying, especially if you've just sung. I used to be very, the old SSLs, when we were working on SSLs, I don't work on SSLs now, but when we used to have automatic talkback. So the minute the track stopped, the talkback would come on. My old engineer used to get very naughty with the talkback, especially with people he didn't like. He'd say things, somebody would say, "Take it to the middle part." And he'd go, "Yes, you twat." Gary, don't do that. He would just lift his finger off at the last minute, especially if they were bugging him, I prefer to have it on all the time so there's no misunderstandings, You don't know how well your singer has learnt the song. So if they're singing the wrong tune, you must correct them. Most aging rock stars are great bluffers, so beware. They can sell you something, you know what I mean? I try not to look at singers while they're singing, because all the good ones look too good, and you'll stop listening and you'll just be watching, watching them do it. Whereas, people who are going to listen to the record are only going to hear it. This does vary massively from artist to artist, but most will not have learned the song properly. To be honest, most of them will have listened to it in the limo, if it depends how, especially if it's a favor for somebody else. And so you're going to have to you're going to have to take them through it and teach them. If your singer starts off sounding crap, don't panic. All right? Be patient. Sometimes it sounds dreadful when guys start singing. They sound so rough, they sound so husky, they haven't got the tune right, the phrasing's awful. You think, my God, is this good? What have I done, right? I sort of like the singer to sing the song all the way through, because that way you get a performance, and if you're comping it, then the intensity that the singer's singing it at is much more relatable to a performance of it all the way through. That's the ideal. And if we work with good singers like Seal or Rod or somebody like that, they'll generally sing the song all the way through, and they'll be able to. But some singers, you only have to do the first verse, and that ain't going to happen in a million years, right? So then you just have to take it apart, and you have to be patient, and you have to do it line by line. I mean, if you can get one take all the way through, that's a good thing. But, I have had singers blow up on me after one take all the way through, and then you have to give them a rest and start again. If they're singing out of tune, don't tell them they're out of tune. Don't use those words, because they're not doing it on purpose. And so they won't really be able to fix it in any sort of way other than there's a few tricks that you can use. Generally, if they're good, they might sing a bit out of tune at the start. But there's all kinds of little ways that you can get them to, things that you can say, like, make sure you get up to that note. Hold that note down a bit. It's always a good thing if you're singing a high note, actually, to put your head down. I'm not going to start giving anybody lessons on how to sing. I've had varying experiences with their singing instructors in studios, good and bad. I don't think it's the place, personally, for singing instructors. You can pause between takes and chat about other stuff, because sometimes that's really effective. You take the singer's mind off it and think about something else for a minute. If you can get the singer in the right frame of mind, as well, is really important. Like, if they're singing a song, if it's like a sort of a love song, who are you singing it to? Is the person standing there? Imagine you're singing it to them. Don't be too specific with your input. Keep it general, apart from input about the tune. And I've always found best input about the tune with the tune is to keep singing it to the singer. If there's a line that they get wrong. If there's a line your artist's having a problem with, don't go straight to it. You know what I mean? If you go straight to a line there's a problem with, the problem will double. You've somehow got to slide into it from the side, work around it, try doing the line before it, and every time run through into that line and hope that maybe the singer gets it right. Try not to get hung up doing one line over and over and over again. I mean, sometimes you can't avoid it. I did a version of a Downtown Lights, which is a Blue Nile track. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, with quite a famous singer. And if you saw the vocal comp session, there's like 5 takes all the way through. And then one line, there's 30. It was a line in that song that went, "Tonight and every night, let's go walking down a city street." It's a tough line. The singer couldn't get it, so it's like 20 takes, and then we had to put bits of it into the... Most singers are instinctive, and the good ones trust their instincts, so don't drive them out of their comfort zone. The more you try and manipulate what they sing, the more responsibility you'll have to take, So if you can just kind of keep them going without getting too involved. Don't mark lines on your lyric sheet as they are singing. I had an argument with Jeffrey Katzenberg about that. We were doing something for Spirit Stallion and the Cimarron, and Brian Adams was singing, and Jeffrey Katzenberg said, "Why are you taking notes?" And I said, "Well, because he can see me. If every time he sings I start doing this, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to listen to it all again anyway." And anyway, I know where I am with it. I always try and keep a tally in my head of what I have and what I need, right? 7 takes should be enough. It should be enough, but sometimes it isn't. I mean, obviously, if you're up against it, you can do as many takes as you like. There's one guy I did 50 takes of every line with. He was quite famous. I won't tell you who he was, but it was excruciating. If you've ever seen 50 takes of a song on Pro Tools, it's daunting. And funny enough, with this guy at the end of it all, I said, it took 2 days to do the song. I said to him, "How about doing a take all the way through?" And he went, "It's a bit of a weird idea." Okay. And he blew up after the 3rd line. So it was pointless, even though he'd done every line 50 times. After you've done enough takes, the artist is satisfied and, with themselves. It's often a good idea to get them to do a soft take. Say to them, "Why don't you just sing the whole song softly?" That's an easy one. And it can sometimes produce quite good results because, they've sung it quite a lot. They know it. And just the idea that they're going to do it softly, it gives them a little bit of inspiration. Make sure you have a good opening line. That's the most important thing. Just in your head. And so when you've finished and you've done your soft take and you've done takes and the artist's all happy and everyone's, the vocal session's nearly over, that's the time to tackle the problem line. If you're not sure you've got the opening line, do a few takes of the opening line. Get the vocal. That's the most important thing. This is important too. Don't comp or tune a vocal in front of the singer. Don't even talk about it. Don't talk about Melodyne. This is me. You might want to talk about it. Never mention it, right? Never do it in front of them. If you start comping and tuning a vocal in front of the person that did it, they'll want to do it again. And then you'll just have another take. They've already done it a load of times, but they'll do it again, and you'll have another. So best to get them out of the way, and then you can really spend some time on it. Right, so that deals with the actual doing of it. Sometimes if you're in wildly the wrong key and you're up against it schedule-wise, once or twice I've had to do it where I've literally had to get the acoustic guitar out of the drum machine and do a quick new backing track in a key a fifth away from the one that I had, right? Hasn't happened very often, but whatever you have to do to get the vocal. Now, post-session, you have the vocal in the computer, but you're going to put together from all of these takes a vocal. If there's only 3 or 4 takes, then the way I do it in that sort of situation is I generally listen to all the takes and think, which is the best one? If it's just a few. maybe take two's really good. So I'll use take two as the main take, and I'll just pop bits in from the other takes. But if you've got more than that, then the only way to do it is line by line. Don't try comping vocals on headphones. Maybe you do that here, I don't know. I've never found it works for me. I always have to be coming out of some speaker or something so I can hear it playing into the air. The less tuning you have to do, the better. But you will have to do some. I mean, the idea that you are not going to tune the vocal these days, if you're working with some big artists and you don't tune them up, they'll murder you and you won't get a gig again, you know. You've got to make them sound great, whatever it takes. Don't be afraid to put the vocal in time. It'll sound better. I was working with an Italian singer, really great singer, but I wasn't doing his vocals because they were in Italian. And I said to him, what's the point of me comping your vocals? They're all in Italian. I don't understand it. And he said, well, you should do one. Do one. So, okay, all right, well, so listening to a bunch of takes in Italian, I put something together. But what I also did is I put him in time. When he came in, I played him the comp I'd done. And he said, oh, no, maybe you haven't picked the right vocals. And then he heard the comp that his vocal producer had done, and he didn't like it. And he said, no, he's moved me. He's changed my timing. He said, let me listen to yours again. And I listened to mine. He said, there, I'm free. I'd actually moved every fucking note. So, but he was happy. So who cares? I didn't tell him. The comp should be seamless and flow as though it was a single take. Well, I mean, that's the ideal. Sometimes, you know, you've got to do the best you can. Sometimes slipping in the odd soft line's really good, you know. But sometimes you're caught between quality of voice and the pitch. And I suppose you can always fix the pitch, but you can't fix the quality of the voice. I mean, there are loads of levels of comping, right? So if you think, I think about it as like 3 levels. The first level is you listen through your 7 or 8 vocals and you put together a vocal, and you might have to tweak the odd word, but it's really good and you're done and there it is, right? That's one. Then the next sort of level of comping is it doesn't work like that. And you have to go into words, and you have to take syllables, and you have to move syllables, and you have to move words, and you have to put things together. Then the next level down from that is, and sometimes, you know, you have to deliver something, right? It's not a question of you don't have the time. You have to deliver this thing, and your singer has maybe gone back to America or gone back to Russia. So you, in the case of Tattoo, and you can't get them back. So you have to make do with what you've got. And if you're struggling, this is when you have to go to DEFCON 3, where you have to bring in a ringer. There's a couple of levels before it. One of the things I've done frequently is if the singer's phrasing is awful and whatever, I'll go and sing the song myself or get somebody else to sing it who I know is really good, and chop my singer around so that his phrasing or her phrasing sounds really, you know, sounds smooth and good. When I did that record with Tattoo, all the things she said, and a couple of other occasions, only 2 other occasions, I've had to bring in other singers. With Tattoo, they couldn't speak English, and so even after weeks, I still had problems with certain words. So I brought an American girl in, and she sang the song, but we actually used the front of Tattoo, the middle of the American girl, and the end on most of the words. It's a bit like a work of art, but you don't want to be doing that. That's only when you're absolutely desperate. Maybe as a way of finishing off, I'll tell you a tiny story. Back in 2008, I did a track with a guy called John Legend. It was actually called, I did 2 tracks with him. One was called If You're Out There, it was for Obama. And there was another one called This Time. And This Time was just his voice and a piano and a pad and a couple of other things. I did it at my house in LA. Anyway, a couple of months after I did it, John Legend called me up and said, I've just been listening to This Time. I was, yeah. And he said, God, it's one of the best vocals I've ever done. What did you do? What did you say? How did you get me to do that? I said, well, when you brought me the track, there was a guide vocal on it. And I really liked your guide vocal. It had a certain quality to it. So I got my PA to phone your engineer. And I got your engineer on the phone and I asked him how many takes he'd done for the guide vocal. And he said 5 takes, but they just used the last one. I said, can you send me the 5 other takes? So I said, so the reason your vocal's so good is because I comped it mostly from your original session. So it wasn't something I said. It wasn't magic, it was just hard work. And mostly people in the world that John Legend comes from don't put that work in. Anyway, there you go, vocals.
Right. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Trevor. It was a real a journey in human psychology as much as the technical side. So I'm sure you've got loads of questions. Would anyone like to ask the first one?
Hiya, and thanks very much for doing this. You're an absolute living legend, and thank you very, very much. So the question I've got is, who is, I mean, we know Seal's fabulous, and maybe the answer is Seal, but who is the best harmonizer that you've ever worked with? Who did the best harmonies?
Well, I have to actually say Seal.
This is what we thought. Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I wanted
because
to ask you. Yeah.
you know when Seal did the backing vocals on Kiss from a Rose, he came. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I seem to remember, and I think the guy that engineered them, Tim Wyden, is here now, and we did them so fast. Seal just came and said, "I got all these ideas. Let's just do it." And we just banged them all down. You're right. Seal was definitely the best harmony singer. The best singer of harmony live on the stage would have to be Chris Squire from Yes. I always thought he was absolutely brilliant. But Seal would be the best on records.
Thank you very much.
Hi. Thank you for this. So I have a question for partially on harmonies as well, but more like how you treat background vocals and layers. Let's say you're working with someone who's working with a bunch of vocal layers, and that's a lot. Like
if I'm working with somebody with a bunch of...
who specializes with like vocal layering, like let's say Mariah Carey, their style, where you have like walls of vocal layers, and then you have the main vocal. What is your take on treating the main melody versus the harmonies of the vocals and that whole group?
Well, as a general rule, if the lead vocal is just one voice and all of the harmonies are double tracked or quadruple tracked, that always has the effect of making them seem like harmonies, and the lead is just a solo vocal, Most singers who do their own harmonies, I mean, there's not many. I once tried to get Rod to do a harmony. I said to him, have you ever done a harmony? He said, nah, never done a harmony. And I was like, well, it's easy. He said, don't like it. And I said, look, it's easy. All you do is you sing a different tune over the same piece of music. Then you put the two together. And I got him to sing. I got him to sing a bit of harmony with himself, and I heard 2 Rods together on a harmony. And it was so wrong. It was just wrong. So I never tried it again.
Are there any psychological traits or patterns of behavior with artists that you work with that sort of determine whether they're a successful artist or the ones that don't make it?
Generally, the ones that become successful are the ones that perform well under pressure. When you kind of push them a bit and they kind of respond, they're generally the ones that make it. When I was working on Crazy with Seal, there was a bit at the end of it where he was going ba-da, 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 ba, ba-da, da-da, da-da, da, ba-da, da. And I just said to him, why don't you write a lyric for that bit? And he came back the next day with a whole lyric. In a sky full of people, only someone. That's somebody who's going to be successful because he thought about it and taken it seriously and put some time and written a brilliant lyric to go over that middle bit. Those are generally the people that succeed, But, that's... Other people succeed as well. I don't know how sometimes, but they do.
Hi, thank you very much. I've just got a question regarding like starting out, and if you've got any advice of like how you can get into like the studio and start out as a producer.
I know this is getting more difficult, isn't it? I mean, when I started out, you see, the thing is, I was primarily a musician and a songwriter, and when I tried to become a producer, it took me about 4.5 years of doing demos for songwriters, working for publishing companies. Because back then studios cost more than they cost now, and you know, when you had no experience, how are you going to get somebody to pay 300 quid for an afternoon in the studio with you? It's really hard. And you know, looking back on it, I used to use every demo. There was an old publisher on Denmark Street called Stewart who liked me, and he would sign writers and he would give me the writers, and he'd give me a budget of £300 or something, £200, and I'd go and make 4 demos in the demo studio. And every time I did one of those, I'd try something different. I'd try the drums with 3 mics. I'd be reading in magazines about things, and I'd try all of those things. But it still took me nearly 5 years. By the time Jeff Downs and I made Video Killed the Radio Star, we'd been making sort of records for demos and commercials for years, you know, and we put every trick that we learned, you know, every attention grabbing trick into Video Killed the Radio Star. Getting into a studio is, I think there's a lot less. I used to have studios and I don't have them anymore. Just have a studio in my house. I still think though that if you have an education, you know, the producers, I mean, I'm one producer, but there's lots of producers and they all have a team. You know, I think that's what you do these days. You get into a producer's team. It wasn't an easy business back in the 70s. And I'm sure in some ways it's even more difficult now. But I would never do anything for the money till you're 30. And don't get married till you're successful. Otherwise you'll have to earn a living. And that can be a real problem, you know. You know, if you keep trying, because it's an artistic business. If you keep trying, one day you'll get a break. And if you've been working hard and doing lots of stuff, when that little moment comes and it happens to everybody, I don't care who they are, if they keep going, there'll be one moment when everything just lines up. And if you've put the work in, then you'll be able to take advantage of that. This old publisher said to me, he said, you know, the music business, he said, every day you struggle, you're doing demos, you're doing this, and it all seems like pointless. Am I ever going to get a hit? Is anybody ever going to be interested in anything I do? And then one morning you wake up and you're in business. What happened? Right? Boy, was he right. The thing is, you've just got to keep going. But you've also got to be realistic. You know, it's like there's no point in, you know, if you're a 35-year-old guy who's slightly overweight, it's no good thinking that you can become a ballerina, you know what I mean? It's like there's certain things that you're going to be good at. And one of the things you find that nearly everybody in the music business, whether it's somebody, you know, that's making the coffee, somebody that's engineering, somebody that's whatever, keeping the studio tidy, probably find that they're a guitar player in a group. Everybody has done something, you know. I was a bass player, but I could see by the time I got to my mid-20s that just being a musician was going to end up playing a load of shit that you didn't like, right, for the money, because of the, you know, and I could see where that would end up, and I thought I want to go into production. I wasn't a good enough singer to be a singer or whatever, you know, and I only started songwriting because I fixed up so many people's songs. I started thinking, my God, I've just rewritten this guy's song and he hasn't said a word. It was nothing like this when he first played it to me. If I can do that, why don't I write my own songs? So I started writing them, but then I was much more in love with the idea of being a record producer rather than being a songwriter. That's a whole other world.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'd be very interested to hear what your take is on the advent of Dolby Atmos and spatial mixing, or if you have one.
We've just been doing a load of that. Well, it depends what you want out of life, really. Do you want to sit here and have Elton John, the backing vocals on Rocket Man go over your head? Is that what floats your boat? I don't know, to me, Dolby Atmos is one of those things. What's good about it is that we can get some money out of it. Yet again, a few grand out of it. But from a creative point of view, I don't know. I just don't know because, there's something funny about having a track taken apart in that way and being able to see clearly some of the components. Stereo's enough for me. I don't know who listens to Dolby Atmos, and I don't know where they listen to it, because I've listened to it in some fabulous rooms, and the mixes sound interesting. They sound lovely, and Elton John's Rocket Man is the one they all use to that's the reason I said it, to demonstrate it, because where it goes, Rocket Man, they kind of pan it over your head, But I suppose that, I should stop moaning about it. It means, I've grown up with stereo. I've got 2 speakers. I've actually got 5 speakers in my studio, 7 when it comes down to it, because I bought into the 5.1 years ago. Not that we ever used that either. Although I've heard some brilliant mixes on it. The problem with all of these mixes is, where are you listening to them? Do you have 15 speakers in your living room? I own part of a business in Soho Square that has a Dolby Atmos theatre room, and it has 64 speakers, huge subwoofers in the ceiling. Where else are you ever going to listen to that apart from there, So I suppose it's good for the cinema, but not even good for the cinema, because if you work on songs in a film, there's no way they let you use the back speakers for anything. I tried, they won't let you. That's for special effects, cars and bombs and planes, not for music.
Do you, when you're recording vocalists, do you find do you have a thing you do try and do it at a particular time of the day? Do you find it's better at night when there's no distractions? And also alcohol, is that, I presume it depends on the singer. Is it good for the singers to get a bit pissed so they're relaxed?
No. I don't think it's good. They can drink a bit. I mean, if that's what they're used to, right? Depends what they're used to. It's like...
Tell us this story.
What story? No, I was just trying to...
I thought you were going to come up with a rock and roll story there.
No, I've never encouraged singers to drink. The problem with alcohol is a little bit of it's okay, but then when you start getting too much of it when you're singing, it affects your inner ear a little bit. And you can't help but do it. If your singer likes to smoke a bit of pot, there's no problem with that, because that's a different thing. With pot, you end up on the end of a pin. At the end of the evening, you're so focused. But with alcohol, you end up all over the place. I don't know that many singers that drink alcohol while they sing in the studio. I've had problems with singers, constantly going to the toilet and coming back all kind of... But, you have to deal with that as well. It tends to make them a little bit overconfident. So I don't really like that stuff either.
And is there a particular, do you try and, do you find it's better at night time? Is a bit more of a better vibe at
well,
night?
some, I once tried to get the guys in Yes to sing in the morning. Because Choir said rock and roll was never made before midday. So there's no way I am singing anything before midday. And I always think the afternoon's good for singing. Sort of 1 till 5. You're up. You've done all your stuff, and it's a working day. So the afternoon's good. Night's all right. With Seal in the early days, I used to live in a house with him. I used to get him going out or coming back. I'd get him and say, "Oh, come on, Sid, just do a couple of vocals on this tune." And then sometimes he'd get back at 3 o'clock in the morning with somebody, and I get him to sing then. That can be really good, but only with the right person. Most people have gone to bed.
Right.
But the producer after me that worked with Seal, he called me up. I remember. He didn't work with him for long. He said, "How do I get him in the studio? He's just disappeared. I haven't seen him for a week." "How did you do it? How did you get Marcella to share the house with him?" "That's the only way, man. Get in the house with him. Then at least you know where he is." So it varies, but mainly the afternoon.
Thank you so much for the masterclass. It was very good. And I have a question about a technical side or recording side. So when you have a singer and they really emphasize their singing, their syllables, or get really into the singing and their vocal range. Like you mentioned, the man who had a huge vocal range. So could you elaborate maybe on some techniques that you would use, like positioning the mic or the pop filter, how far away, when they really, or in the vocal range, you said you had overheads or something like that on the man that you showed singing?
Yeah, well, it's all about gain structure. I mean, anybody who travels by train will know that British Rail don't have a clue about gain structure. Have you ever, this train is going to be arriving in Derby in 2 minutes. Totally distorted, right? It's how you set up the vocal chain. Most singers know that every microphone has a sweet spot, right? This microphone has a sweet spot, but because of this microphone's designed for live, so the sweet spot's right on top of it, almost with your lips on it. If you go back here, there's nothing. Back here, there's nothing at all. That's why they're such great live mics, because you could have a lot of them up there and they don't pick everything up. This is not the same as like, a Telefunken 251. If I was holding a Telefunken 251 here, it wouldn't be the same. I could hold it there and I would still sound pretty good.
I keep on experimenting with the position of the mic,
Yeah.
and it can sound very hard sometimes. I sing far away, close pop filter about like 2 inches away. But also, you said the overheads you did on when you went on the high part.
Yeah. When somebody's going from, from singing like softly to singing incredibly loud, they can't get back quick enough. And they're going to overload this mic anyway, even if they're back here. But if you've got an 87 up just above their heads, I mean, Tim, my engineer, would probably tell you better than me, but, about here. And don't tell them it's on, don't, otherwise they'll start doing this and singing up into it. Just have it there. They won't notice that their voice is totally distorted. Well, they may, but most of them don't. So that's one way around that. But learn, if you watch old singers back from the days of the 50s, if you watch Frank Sinatra or those guys, they're always moving the mic backwards and forwards. And they're almost like their own limiters and compressors, It's a bit of a lost art, that now, especially because in rock bands, you're just singing through a mic like this with your lips on it live. You're not going like this, you know what I mean? It wouldn't work.
There's one more question over there. Couple more questions.
Do you let the vocalists listen back to the takes throughout the recording process?
If they ask. Sometimes rather than saying, you're really screwing that line up, I'll play it back to them a couple of times and then they can figure that they're screwing it up without me having to say it. If the singer wants to listen to a take, like say if there's one good take all the way through, if it's somebody who sings the whole song, of course, I'll let them hear it. A lot of singers I find, they don't want to listen to it. They've sung it 7 or 8 times. I'll listen to it when you put it together, and then I'll tell you what I think of it, rather than wanting to listen to it right there and then. But if they want to listen to it, fine. Sometimes it's better to say less and illustrate things, like playing it back to them.
Hi, thank you very much for the masterclass. I just wanted to ask how you got the idea for Video Kill the Radio Star, because it's so iconic.
We got the idea from a story by a guy called J.G. Ballard. And it was a song about a sound sweep. And he would go around big buildings and he had a sonic vacuum cleaner. Like he'd go to a cathedral and he'd clear out all of the sounds from that week. I mean, it's the idea that sounds would mount up in an old tapestry or in a cathedral is a really odd idea. But the story is set in a time when people don't listen to music anymore, and music is just an emotion that they get. And that was the springboard for the song, really. All the stuff about, they took the credit for your second symphony, rewritten on machine with new technology. All those kind of things. We're talking about this sort of sci-fi view of music. And the name The Buggles came from, this is like in 1978, we had this idea that somebody had a computer in the basement of a big building and they were manufacturing records with the computer. And the Buggles were a name that they used for this fictitious band.
I think we just got to say, really,
Thanks.
What a privilege to have Trevor doing this masterclass. Thank you so much. Big round of applause, please. Thank you. so much. It was fantastic. Thank you, everyone.